Welcome to Take a Seat, where we sit down with experts on a wide range of topics related to the science of human flourishing. Together, we're going to explore topics that can help us level up, give us hope, and maybe even make us feel optimistic about the future and our ability to live good lives both individually and collectively. I'm your host, Dr. Nick Holton. I'm a coach, consultant, and speaker in the field of optimal human functioning, but I'm most passionate about science and stories that can help us create a better system of education, one that leads individuals to the greatest angels of their nature and builds stronger societies as a result. Together with the Shipley School, a global leader in educating for flourishing, we're happy to have you join us. Whether you're someone trying to build your best self or a better community, we've got something for you, so take a seat. Hey, everybody. This week, we took a seat with Dr. Scott Barry Kaufman. Scott is one of the world's most revered psychologists and has a wide range of areas of expertise, though perhaps most notably for his academic work on intelligence and more recently on self-actualization or the satisfaction of core human needs. Scott has published 9 books, countless peer-reviewed articles, and other popular articles for Psychology Today, Scientific American, and many others. He currently hosts the Psychology Podcast, the #1 psychology podcast in the world, and in 2015 was named one of the top 50 psychologists who are changing the way we see and think about the world. He's taught courses on well-being and intelligence at Columbia, NYU, and the University of Pennsylvania. Most recently, though, he published a new book called Transcend, the new Science of Self-Actualization, in which he revisits human needs and reconceptualizes them in what he calls the Sailboat Metaphor. Our conversation dug into some of the science behind intelligence, IQ, and peak potential, but was centered more so around self-actualization and the Sailboat Metaphor. We touched on the importance of meaning and purpose in life, the tremendous impact belonging and positive relationships have on us, and explored notions of passion, authenticity, and coherence. Of course, we didn't miss the opportunity to chat with Dr. Kaufman about his ideas for a more humanistic approach to education, what he calls a system of inspiration, not evaluation, which I absolutely love. And so here it is, our conversation with Dr. Scott Barry Kaufman. Scott, welcome.
Thanks, Nick. Great to be here from the famous Shipley School.
We hope so. The notable Shipley School, yes, at the very least. But no, we appreciate that, and we appreciate your noticing us and your admiration for us, and we feel
Love
the same
Shipley
about
School.
you.
Grew up in that area.
I know you did. Was it Wynwood, right down the street?
Right down the street. Yep.
Terrific. We're focusing this series on trying to install some hope and some strategies for enabling people to be their best selves and try to enable communities to be the best version of themselves. And I think you got a thing or two to say about that, right? And specifically as it pertains to how we're doing education, certainly in the United States, which Shipley has a very specific interest in. So let's start here. I actually want to kind of pull from Transcend itself a little bit and talk about, sort of how you define what it is you do, because I think Transcend really, for me at least, as I read it, and I've gone through it a couple times now, obviously doing prep for today, it seems to me like it brings together so many of your interests, so many areas that you know quite a bit about, and I think it's written for a very specific purpose, and I think you and I on some level share that purpose. You're just probably a bit better at it than me. And this is how we met, right? Through our work with Flow Research Collective. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about what do you think it is that you do? What are you about as an individual?
Certainly unlocking human potential and helping people who have lots of challenges and struggles sort of see greater possibility for themselves than they realized they had, and maybe the self-imposed limitations they put on themselves as well. So, not just other people's expectations of them, but their own expectations of themselves, and rethinking intelligence, rethinking creativity, but yeah, really rethinking human potential and what it all means. What does it mean to live a self-actualized, meaningful life?
Right. And my sense is just, having heard you on other shows and, read a couple of your books, that's a pretty personal experience for you. Most likely, especially when it comes to sort of, I think your first book was Ungifted, right? And you had, I think a unique educational experience. Wondered if you might be willing to talk a little bit about that, and maybe did that, in part spark your interest in how we see potential?
I really wanted to write that book. Even in grad school, I really was dreaming of writing such a book that uh, would talk about my personal experiences growing up in special education and the sort of expectations teachers had for me, and as well as my friends. I always was confused why my friends didn't in special ed with me. Why they I thought they were immensely talented, immensely creative, and I don't understand why it wasn't appreciated. Why were they focusing so much on all of our deficiencies, exclusively on our deficiencies, and really it really confused me and fired me up. When I got older, like in grad school, to think, well, maybe I can make an impact in education somehow. Maybe I can write a book on this topic. Maybe I can expand our thinking on the topic and expand the way we think of human intelligence. And I wrote this book, Ungifted, that brought together lots of different threads of research on the science of intelligence and also the science of motivation and the science of what I refer to in the book as engagement, and talking about how we can't separate intelligence from engagement. It's IQ tests try to, but I'm not sure that's the best way of really tapping into someone's intelligence, is trying to divorce their self as much as possible from themselves and making that assessment of what they're intellectually and creatively capable of doing in life.
Yeah, and I think the book, and like you said, some of your other writings, maybe for more academic audience, have done a really nice job of that. Will you, just for people that are sort of unfamiliar with sort of these sort of other thoughts on intelligence besides just IQ or sort of like traditional academic intelligence or academic skills, will you tease out what some of those other important components are?
Well, the IQ test, usually you focus on a lot of people focus on the global IQ score, the total IQ score, as a measure of a summation of a person. And I think that's problematic, but I think that we don't need to throw the baby out with the bathwater. There's lots of different subtests on an IQ test that can kind of tell what a pattern of strengths and weaknesses of a student. Maybe they're really verbally inclined, but not so much mathematically or visual spatially. Or their processing speed is working memory. You find a lot of working memory deficits and a lot of what I call, what not just I call, a lot of people in the field call twice exceptional children who have simultaneously have a lot of gifts. They may be intellectually gifted or creatively gifted, and have a learning disability as well. You'll see working memory deficits, and a lot of that is not captured by just that single summary score on an IQ test. So I think there's a lot of value in looking at more domain specific abilities. And I also think that there's this motivational component, which often gets left out of the equation. This motivational component that, a lot of people, when they're really lit up to do something, they really, there's a lot of passion for what they're doing, and there's a future goal in mind of some sort, a future dream that they're working toward. They somehow manage to muster a certain kind of intelligence there, where they look very intelligent in what they're doing. They're able to accelerate that curve, the learning curve, which is definite, which a lot of people see as part and parcel of giftedness. So I think that we need not neglect that engagement part, and paying attention to listening to people's dreams, or personal goals, as I call it, in Ungifted.
What they're curious about, what they're interested in, right?
Who they want to become.
Yeah, right. I think the phrase, I'm aware of and that you use in the book is harmonious passion, right?
Yes.
But that ultimately, I think, starts with curiosity and interest and some sense of, who we are and authenticity and things of that nature. But I was drawn to one of the comments you make about it in Transcend is referring, I think, to a series of studies that really kind of showed, like you said, we don't need to throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's not that academic intelligence is a bad thing to have. It's just, it's not enough. And I think it can be problematic when that's what we are primarily focusing on,
No, for sure.
especially considering, intellectual curiosity. As I understand, some of it can almost compensate if maybe an IQ level isn't as high as someone might like it to be.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't even believe in the idea of compensation. I want a whole different way of thinking about things. What makes the IQ the privileged center of the universe?
Yeah.
A lot of people talk about gifted underachievers, and I don't even like that concept because that implies they're ungifted overachievers. And how insulting is that? If someone's crushing it, kid's crushing it, and you look at their IQ score, and you're like, what a ungifted overachiever. No, they're just the difference is that they're crushing it, and the other person isn't crushing it, and that's all there is to it. There isn't some. Oh, that person has exceeded what they're capable of. No, because they're doing it, so they're clearly capable of it. So, I just want us to rethink our whole way of thinking about this kind of stuff.
Yeah. Same here. So it's interesting hearing you, use the word crush it. You just met our producer, Melissa. She's going to laugh because it's a phrase I use constantly. But really how do we, and obviously we're coming at this from the context of education. How do we get to a point where we're, helping to sort of develop and grow more young people who do in fact go out and crush it?
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that means necessarily on standardized tests, right? Or GPAs or things of that nature. Again, not that there's anything wrong with that. But what are we missing by prioritizing that, right? And so it makes me curious when you say crush it, are you talking about self-actualizing? Are you talking about, just various components of flourishing? I think you talk about how there's lots of different paths to crushing it, right? What might some of those paths be?
To greatness, multiple paths into greatness.
Yeah, right.
I mean, I just keep coming down. There's no standardized definition of it. It's so personalized. It depends. Again, it all comes down to your personal goals. Are you crushing it in relative to your own personal goals? One person crushing it in the gym and being able to lift weights like I did this morning. I went to a new weight on my bench press and I crushed it this morning and it felt great.
Nice. Congrats.
But that was a goal of mine, but someone else might not have that goal and it wouldn't be crushing it for them.
Part of what I'm thinking about is, does crushing it on some level mean that sort of consistent process of feeling like we're satisfying these needs that you revisit and transcend, right? And I'm thinking about the exploration and the sale and growth. And, my dissertation was on eudaimonic happiness, so I have that sort of orientation, right? Would you be willing to share a little bit about the sailboat metaphor and sort of how some of those things maybe elevate us and maybe get us closer and closer to that ability where we can be thriving or crushing it in that way?
Yes, and it's funny. I rarely use the phrase "crushing it" myself. I think you brought that out of me. Because it doesn't make any sense to say like you're crushing it because your need for connection is being fulfilled. Maybe you could I have lots of friends who adore me. I'm crushing it. That seems
People love me, right?
narcissistic. Yeah, the crushing part tends to be tied to these self-esteem needs, I feel like. But anyway, so there's the sailboat metaphor for life. I think life is something to be experienced. It's not like a trek up a mountain in some sort of way that you get to like a video game, where you reach one level and then you never return to the other levels. Abraham Maslow, who's a lot of people depict this hierarchy of needs with a pyramid. He never drew a pyramid, and a lot of people don't know that. And pyramid, I've argued, is really not the best representation of his ideas about self-actualization. He often made it clear that human development is a 2-step forward, 1-step back dynamic. The best we can do is to keep choosing growth, but we will inevitably, fall flat on our tuchus, and we just have to pick ourselves up and choose growth again. Just keep choosing growth. That's what resiliency is all about, and it's not about perfection. Well, I'll jump right into the sailboat metaphor. So I have the base of is the boat. And the boat of the sailboat indicates security needs. So we do need certain basic needs met to a certain degree, or else we don't feel safe and secure. We don't feel like our boat is sturdy. So that's needs for safety, our need for connection, and our need for self-esteem. These things provide a very strong foundation for our self-actualization. But even just with a secure boat, we can't move anywhere unless we shoot for our self-transcendent needs, our growth needs, and that's requires opening the sail and being vulnerable to the winds, the inevitable winds. You need to move, in a purposeful direction with your values, with a spirit of exploration and love. Knowing that any time the waves can come crashing down on you, knowing any time you can die. Oh my gosh! I mean, nothing's forever. So you still have to act. You still have to move with your values, and despite that uncertainty. But you can stay in the boat and hide in the boat your whole life, but you're not going to grow. So I talk about this sailboat metaphor as this tension or this connection between the security and growth.
Yeah, that's great. Sort of those risk-taking or approach behaviors reminds me of Richard Wiseman, right? Traits of lucky people and sort of a willingness to have a go.
Openness to experience.
Yeah. Yep, exactly.
I love Richard Wiseman's work.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
What a dude.
What a cool dude. What a cool topic. So openness to experience, right? A big
Yes.
part of it, you said, sort of like fluctuating between that security and that growth piece. In the boat, right, in the hull, as it were, you've got things like safety and connection. And I think there's a really, really interesting growing body of research around connection, around relationships. You get into so much terrific detail and nuance in terms of the science of connection, of meaning, of mattering. And, it's something that I think a lot of us often worry about we're losing generally on a cultural level, certainly with things are the way they are right now. But also, in the context of education or our personal lives, I think we often kind of have this rugged individualism and I'll make it and, on my own and all that sort of stuff. But we are, I mean, is it a bridge too far to say we really, in many ways, are reliant on our connections and our relationship and sense of belonging for our ability to crush it?
Yeah. I mean, connections are the thread of meaning in life. I mean, without meaningful interweb of connections, we're all alone, and there's different types of aloneness. Existential aloneness is a certain type of aloneness. Is not a place you want to be as a human. If you're human, you tend to not want to be. Now, serial killers, it turns out, are okay with that. And it's an interesting question whether or not our serial killer is human. And I think that's a really interesting philosophical question. I mean, they certainly are in one sense, but in another sense, there's something core to being human, which it involves those connections and involves having a good reputation and having, in a sense, that people can trust you, in a sense that people can, in a sense that you can trust others in times of need. We can't get through everything alone. It's too much to deal with the givens of human existence alone.
Yeah, well said. So I've pulled a couple quotes here. I'd love to read one from the book that I think really speaks to this. And I also wonder, The thoughts in my head are like, this is something that's potentially really missing from education. And I'd be curious to get your thoughts on, sort of when you think the quote unquote right time is to sort of introduce some of these ideas. But in the book, you put down a quote from Maslow, quote unquote, it must be stated that self-actualization is not enough. Personal salvation, I guess what we might say, crushing it, right? And what is good for the person alone cannot be understood in isolation. The good of the other people must be invoked, as well as the good for oneself. It is quite clear that a purely intrapsychic, individualistic psychology without reference to other people and social conditions is not adequate. So, I think you're probably unfamiliar. Our at Shipley, our definition of excellence, specifically educational excellence, we're a school, is achievement, which we just, touched on a little bit. So clearly, we're a school. But the other sort of two legs of this stool are individual well-being and collective well-being.
Yeah.
And I think collective well-being is, a touch point right now, especially when you consider these different collectives, right? Our school community, Pennsylvania has obviously been in the news a lot, the last few weeks, in Philadelphia specifically, the U.S., a larger global community. I mean, was that your impetus for writing the book? Did you know that going in, that you eventually were going to kind of hit this point of emphasis, or you said like Transcend is really about going beyond the self? Is that eventually
definitely.
why you called it Transcend?
For sure. Because a lot of people really talk about Maslow's idea of self-actualization in a really individualistic way, and some people like David Brooks in the New York Times has credited him for the self-esteem movement in the 70s and 80s, where you could be anything you wanted, and it was as being a selfish. And what I discovered is that his writings were really the farthest thing from, especially the last couple of years of his life, the farthest thing from a selfish point of view. He very much viewed self-actualization as a bridge to transcendence, as getting your own self integrated enough that what is good for you in the world is also good for the world. And there's a
Win-win.
And yeah, win-win. What he calls, or adopted a term from Ruth Benedict, the anthropologist, synergy. That there's a great synergy in the world between you and the world, and that idea of synergy, it's like connection en masse. It's like being really connected to all of humanity. Oneness, which Buddhist and philosophy is all about as well. I mean, Maslow's not the first one to talk about transcendence. And I tried to integrate Eastern and Western philosophy, Eastern and Western notions of self-actualization in the book.
Yeah. It occurs to me, school, and air quotes here, right? Like just with the big S, not necessarily set up for that.
No.
It occurs to me that's very competitive. It's sort of like a zero-sum game, right? Kind of a dog-eat-dog sort of environment.
Yeah.
I think I'm relatively new to Shipley. I think Shipley strives to do a good job of this, and I think if I were channeling some of the folks, I'm friends with for instance, our director of diversity, equity, inclusion, Brandon Jacobs, and I think he and our head of school, Michael Turner, would probably say like we've got a lot of room for improvement.
I like that.
I think digging into that is obviously, much more complex, but one thing I think is very clear to us as a school, and you've sort of said it, is that, like Stephen Post, right? Good things happen to good people.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of reasons to care about something, that's more significant than just the self, to have this like real deep sense. We could, I'd love to go down the road with science of purpose and meaning as well, but it seems to me that just, what Transcend is talking about is that starts with connection. That starts with feeling like you matter. That starts with, things like relatedness.
Oh yeah. The mattering is a big part of purpose. Yeah. Finding some purpose that feels like you're making a positive impact on the world. Yeah.
Will you take us down that road actually a little bit? Let's maybe start with an overarching term like meaning, and you talk about 3 types of meaning in the book, and how does that relate to purpose? Because I think that's something a lot of folks maybe are struggling with. I know a lot of young people, students struggle with, right? Like I'm just sitting through these classes day after day after day. What for? how am I contributing? And like you said from the outset, are my strengths, my talents, what am I contributing to? Yeah, if we could just kind of go down the meaning and purpose research line a little bit, I think people would love that.
In psychological literature, there are different meanings of the word meaning. Some people refer to coherence, which is seeing whether or not there's some sense of that your environment, your immediate environment, makes sense. There's enough predictability in your environment, enough regularity that you're not overwhelmed, and you don't feel and you feel like you can trust the dependability of your environment. So that's coherence, and that is an important form of meaning. That's kind of like small m meaning. There's also more bigger M, purpose oriented kind of meaning, where you feel like your life has is future oriented. That you has some sort of goal. You have some major, large, self organizing goal that's the center of your being. That you kind of organize everything else around that. And it's very future oriented, and
It's part of the sale, right?
hell yeah, hell
Yeah,
yeah,
hell yeah, hell yeah is right.
yes. When you're driven by the sail, you're driven by your purpose. When your boat is sinking because there's too many holes in it, you're being driven by your boat. So you got to really tap in deep and see what's driving you. But yeah, what is driving you, Nick?
I mean, that's ultimately, I think, what this thing we're doing, this podcast we're launching is about, right? I think a lot of us know from our own experience or from sitting in a lot of classrooms that it can go better.
Yeah.
It can draw out some good stuff, right? Like certainly that was your experience. I had wonderful, wonderful teachers who I love dearly and still care a lot about, right? But at times, certainly that was my experience. I'm thinking about, Mark Brackett over at Yale and that study they did that showed 75% of the words that kids use to describe school are basically negative or unpleasant. And it's things like bored, stressed, and tired. And it's like, this is the system through which we can actualize loads and loads and loads of potential, right? It seems to me that we're wasting a lot of it.
We waste so much potential in schools, and I think because sometimes we are focused too much on achievement versus self-actualization. So I'm wondering, yeah.
So what would what would the sailboat metaphor look like in schools? Would it be a completely different system? Would you just kind of metaphorically blow the whole thing up and start over? Would it be, is it how a classroom culture, environment looks? What would it do to curriculum? Have you thought about this?
I have. I've thought about what a humanistic education would look like, where we treat students as humans first, versus potential high standardized test scores first, or high grades as the most important thing about them. What is the most important thing about a student? Is it their potential to do well in your classroom? What is the signal you're sending to students? I think that a sailboat metaphor school, or a school built around a sailboat metaphor, would really take seriously the needs for safety, connection, and healthy pride for one's work, and really care about those needs and recognize their important needs, and also help them explore who they are, explore who they want to become. I don't think it's necessary in high school to have the grand purpose. I mean, a lot of people of various ages, any age in life, necessarily have figured it all out. It's not, but that's not the point. The point is helping to set students in the direction that they want to set sail in life, in some way. And most students complete K through 12 still having no idea what direction they want to set sail in. Even if they've gotten straight A's in all honors classes and got perfect AP scores, they still don't know what direction they want to sail in their life. And that's a shame.
Yeah, I really could not have said it better, right? Don't have to know the destination, but at least have a sense of direction and sort of have that sail at least partially built. right?
So some vision of what you're setting sail to. Where where are you going?
Yeah. And you mentioned motivation earlier. Why are you going there?
It's so important. Choosing wisely is just as important as crushing it. You can crush the wrong goals, for you. You can crush it, but they could be the wrong goals for you. That's why I was trying to allude to earlier when I said, with the crushing it matters, like what your goals are, but also it matters, how motivated and how deeply in tune with who you really are those goals are. Society can give us lots of goals. Some people might get pressure from their parents to become doctors, and then they crush med school, but they still feel deeply unfulfilled. Are they really crushing it in that case? It asks lots of questions about what it means to crush it in terms of your own soul being fused with what you're crushing.
The Japanese call this, I've never actually pronounced it, out loud. Do you know how to pronounce it?
Ikigai.
Ikigai. Yeah. Okay. That's more or less what I was going to get to. That's what comes to mind. I've done some writing about this. You mentioned it in Transcend, but maybe you'd like to explain a little bit of that for the listeners. I think it really, anytime I show that visual to people, they're like, yeah, that's what it's about. Like, that's awesome. That's what I want. That's what I'm after. Right.
Yeah. I like Ikigai a lot. Yeah. What's your reason for being? What's your, what do you, what's the reason why you're getting out of bed in the morning? But still a lot of that for students, for like K through 12 students, can still be a daunting thing to ask a high school student. What is your reason for being? And even, college students. I have a lot of college students who take my Science of Living Well class and find it so daunting, like, to have a purpose, but, just what are the things that you, that are called self-determination, in the self-determination theory, things that make you feel free when you engage in them, autonomous, give you an intrinsic sense of enjoyment. You don't feel compulsion to do it. You don't feel like you're driven by inner or outer pressures to do it. And those things are the things you really should be setting sail toward, because life is short.
Yeah, that's a lot of what drew me to this reconceptualization, this new metaphor. My dissertation was primarily driven, and you mentioned DC and Ryan, right? Intrinsic motivation.
Yeah.
And it seems to me a lot of that's lacking in schools in general, right? A lot of the why. And like you said, it's not reasonable for 16, 17, year olds to kind of have all those answers figured out.
No.
I just wonder if we're, are we giving them the space to, right? Are we allowing them to set sail in particular directions?
That's the question. I think private schools can get more leeway in doing that than public schools.
Certainly. Something else I want to ask you about it. You just recently, I think, retweeted an article you had written, and the phrase you use, I think, is psychologically rich life. And, for a long time, we've been a lot of what we do at Shipley or, working with clients coming out of the focus of positive psychology. It's not always the ideal name for the field in my mind, because I think it suggests that things should always be pleasant. And I'm curious, how you feel about that. I have my guesses, but when you talk about a psychologically rich life, you think there's value in experiencing the full range of the sort of emotional palette?
Again, it really comes down to your own personal goals. I will never tell someone how they should live their lives. You have to find a life that works best for you. The psychological rich life is an alternative to other kinds of lives that have the good life conceptualizations in positive psychology literature. I mean, positive psychology, you'll see, like, it's almost like you only have two choices in life. You can be happy or you can have meaning. Like like your dissertation, eudaimonia. But what if you want to opt out of both of those? What
Yeah.
I just want to live a rich life. I want to live a life full of. It doesn't always have to be meaningful either, or purpose. Everything. Oh, it's my purpose. Just like I feel like I live a psychologically rich life, and that's what I've chosen over anything else, is that I want experiences that will expand my horizons, that are complex, that make me think and understand the world, understand people. I want varied experiences. I'm very open to new experiences, I don't think all the experiences, I can't guarantee they're going to be meaningful. I can't justify. Sometimes my friends say, "Why did you do that? Why do you go to that party? Or why did you?" And I'm like, well, there's no reason other than I want to expand my horizons, and that's it. They're like, but that's not in line with your purpose. It's like, well, then why does everything have to be so dramatic? Like, people are so dramatic.
There's some room for hedonism, right?
Yeah,
some room for zest.
Yeah, it's just like, calm down, jeez. Like, gosh, Walt Whitman said, do I contain multitudes? Well, yes, I contain multitudes. It's just, I'm human, I think that I want to empower people as well to live a psychologically rich life if they want to as well. But you do have to decide what is right for you. I mean, is there only one good path to the good life? And I would say no. There's not only one good path to the good life. You really, really have to find out what works best for your unique constellation of personality, of life experiences, of talents, and things that you can contribute to the world, and only you can figure that out
by setting sail, right? By exploration,
getting out of your comfort zone. Yeah.
How does one who is uncomfortable getting out of their comfort zone go about that? What are some strategies? It's
very hard to. So if someone is still in the fear response, someone's still in the their defenses are erected, you can't. Like Maslow said, you can't rip the psychological defenses off of a person. It's a tough question you're asking me. Like, how to?
Yeah.
Like, I'm not a how-to guy. I really am not. And I think that part of humanistic psychology is gently leading someone to having self-insights, and what Karen Horney referred to as self-analysis. So I think a lot of self-analysis is really necessary to understand what your major triggers are in life, the things that really do cause you to put up and erect a shield around yourself, and slowly testing the waters and seeing what happens if you aren't so defensive every time someone criticizes you. What if you say, I'm going to just experiment, tip my toe in the water? I can always come back to my defenses if I want. But what if I listen to someone who made a point about criticism? Maybe they have a point. Maybe I can grow from that. Interesting. This person disagrees with me. Maybe instead of just your initial reaction being, oh, well, they're stupid. They believe in that political candidate, or they have that belief system. They must be stupid if they disagree with me. As opposed to you thinking you're the center.
No one thinks that, do they? We don't have
Everyone thinks that the other person is stupid, and that you're the right one. But I'm saying, maybe considering, well, maybe the universe doesn't revolve around me. Maybe I'm not God, and that my belief system is the only belief system that could possibly be right. So I think but you can't rip it off, right? You can't just rip those defenses off, but test the waters gradually until it's no longer necessary to have a safety blanket anymore.
Have a growth mindset about it, right?
Yeah, that's an interesting thing, because that's a whole other topic.
Sure.
And that's a whole rabbit hole we can go down, because because I know everyone in the education space is obsessed with with Carol Dweck's growth mindset, but I've been pretty critical of that. And even to Carol Dweck, who's on my podcast, I have immense respect for her and her career, and I would direct people to listen to my very respectful discussion with her on the Psychology podcast, where we really confronted her about a lot of that data, and she was very gracious in responding.
Yeah, well, we'll put it in the show notes because I think that's a worthwhile thing for our listeners to do.
I just want to be clear that Maslow. Well, first of all, thank you for that. But I want to be clear that there's a difference that I make in between Maslow's notion of growth motivation and Carol Dweck's notion of growth mindset. What I'm referring to, Nick, is growth motivation. That's what I'm talking about. You could have a growth mindset for the wrong things, and you can apply a growth mindset to getting good standardized test scores and increase standardized test scores, and then you realize you've wasted all that time when you could have developed that talent for art, which is what you actually want to do in your life.
So when you say growth motivation, it cues up something else I've heard you mention, which is sort of, you can correct my language around this, but that you feel that most people kind of have one or maybe a couple primary core drivers. I believe it's safety, happiness, or growth.
Are you talking about my nerdy factor analysis I did with the Reb Rebelle on finding that a lot of people have a status-driven life, security-driven life, and the growth-driven life? I think that's what you're referring to. We did find that fell out into a factor analysis, yeah.
Right. Is that growth motivation? Just sort of a general orientation to
correct
dip your toe in the water, right? That we can cultivate.
Exploration, meaning, and positive impact on the world. And getting outside your comfort zone and opening yourself to new experiences. Yeah, that's growth motivation. But you can see how growth motivation is not the same construct as growth mindset. Yeah,
absolutely. And I like what you said earlier. I think, to me, what I guess sort of the lived overlap is that it's iterative, right? Like you've argued about all the needs.
Correct.
Right. It's a process. It's not a video game. It's not sort of jumping to one level and waving bye-bye to that need. Right.
That's quite right.
Ongoing. Okay. Well, I want to be respectful of your time here. We're starting to wrap up. I've got some, just a few more questions, some kind of quick hitters.
Okay.
Let's go through those. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, here we go. Do you have a go-to activity or exercise? I have written, that helps you be your best self, but I'll tweak it. That helps you crush it. What's a go-to activity or exercise? Something. Oh, you're going to show me?
Yeah, this is my meditation cushion. It's, I return to the cushion, and just that's all you do is just you got to keep returning to the breath and centering yourself. Whenever you lose your center, go back and recenter yourself. Again, 2-step forward, 1-step back dynamic. Choose growth. It's all you can do. Like you're feeling crazy, you're feeling like out of control, go to the cushion and focus on your breath. Center yourself. There's hope. As long as you have a breath, there's still hope.
You, I know you recently had Sharon Salzberg on your podcast.
Oh, love Sharon Salzberg.
Yeah, you have an affection. Yeah, absolutely. She's tremendous. So many people love her. Well, so we'll throw that episode in the show notes as well. So meditation, mindfulness practice in general is that go-to. That's great.
Direct people to that podcast chat.
Yeah, I will. Yeah. Absolutely. She's terrific. You have a go-to. People are interested in rituals, routines. You have a morning routine. You have an evening routine. You have something that helps, center you. You mentioned going to the pillow. Maybe it's just.
Unwinding a couple hours before bed, stop and look at the computer, stop looking at the desktop. Getting good sleep is so essential. We underestimate the value of doing everything you can to protect your sleep value. Rituals. Well, writing really helps for me. Being able to get in the flow state and do activities that get you in the flow state. Like I bicycle, and try, and that really helps focus me. It's great to not be on my phone, for a period of time. Like do activities where you can't possibly access your phone, like bicycling. That'd be dangerous.
Path of most resistance, right? Force yourself to unhook.
Yeah, that's right.
No, I love what you said about sleep, right? Just an active state of recovery, right? On so many levels. We mentioned sort of like, this sort of competitive environment, but it seems like there's a growing I hope it'll start trending the other direction, but a growing competition over like who's worked the most and slept the least.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty nasty recipe.
Yeah, you see that a lot in Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are you into right now? Interests, topics, hobbies, movies, TV?
Well, I loved Queen's Gambit on Netflix. Binge watched that. I'm into a new book project that I'm working on. And I'm really into like the cultural wars that we're seeing right now. Trying to bridge divides. I tweeted out something last night. I think I said, I'm committed to bridging divides, whether or not people want me to do that or not. Because I often find that like people don't welcome it. You know, it's like you try to be a peacemaker and you find that people actually want to fight. People are so bored sometimes they want conflict, you know, and it's like, you know, it's like, well, I'm still going to work for peace.
Your sense of purpose, right?
Yeah.
Your personal goals.
Yeah. Not everyone wants it. Seriously. I'm serious.
No, I follow you. I see some of the comments.
I mean, not everyone wants that.
Exist in that space a little bit as well. Yeah. Well, I want to wrap up with a question, about education. You could snap your fingers, change things for more young people sitting in classrooms tomorrow. What would you give them? What would you impart upon them? What's maybe, I know you said go into the cushion, right? Introspection, the ability to be self-aware, to self-analyze. But what do you think, we as educators can do to help more young people crush it?
Get out of their way.
Right. A lot of them have a sense of it, don't they?
I mean, having teachers get out of the way of the students who want to go in a certain direction, or the students don't even know what they like. So you need to present them with lots of different options. You need to have them experience the world, experience things, not just sit there in a classroom and just listen to being lectured to all the time. I think so much of it is shifting our paradigm of education from one of evaluation to one of inspiration, and that's how I've put it before.
Oh, I love that. Love that. Inspiration, not evaluation.
Yeah, that's what I'm all about.
That's terrific.
Yeah.
You have any hopes individually? What are you hoping for in, let's say, the next couple of years? I think I know your collective hopes. You'd like to see more unity, like to bridge some of those divides.
Oh, gosh, I hope there's a peaceful transition of political power and that people can start listening to each other more and care about each other's suffering more than we do. And my biggest hopes right now are really for humanity. I just don't have my own personal ambitions nearly as much as I used to in my 20s or 30s. I really am kind of putting all my efforts into humanitarian. Using humanistic psychology and positive psychology to make the world a better place, not solely to make individuals happier.
Mm-hmm. Richness, contribution,
yeah,
not just happiness. Yeah, I love it. Scott Barry Kaufman, your most recent book is Transcend, the new science of self-actualization. Everybody should get it. We'll put a link to it in the show notes as well. Why don't you tell us where we can find you?
Thanks, Nick. You can find me just at scottbarrykaufman.com. I have everything there. You can contact me, free resources I put up, my podcast, which is free. You can sign up for my course, which is doing another iteration, the Transcend course, starting in the end of February, I believe. So
great. That's amazing. That's amazing. Instagram, Twitter, at Scott Barry Kaufman.
Yeah, I have yoga pictures of me on Instagram in various poses that are unholy. No, I'm joking. They're very just humanistic psychology quotes, on Instagram. Calm down. Yep. Very good. And then I'm on Twitter, SB Kaufman. You can join the discussion there. And I have a Facebook, profile as well, public one. But there's lots of ways. There's lots of ways to connect.
Yep.
I know it's a theme of today's talk.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Scott, thanks so much for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's such a delight.
Our show is produced by the Shipley School, an independent pre-K through grade 12 day school rethinking education and daring to hope that we can in fact build a better future. I'm Nick Holton, and I'll be your guide through these conversations. We saved you a seat. Come on and join us.